This is going to sound weird, but bear with me. When I was in high school, there was a kid who told everyone he was a demon. I don't feel comfortable even writing his name for reasons you'll soon understand. I'm just going to call him Patrick, even though his name sounds like something out of a Shakespeare play. He was extremely socially awkward and walked around with a super empty stare that made even teachers uncomfortable. He wore the same blank gray hoodie literally every single day. I'm not exaggerating. I'm pretty sure he never washed the thing since he always smelled terrible too. He was decently short and pretty average looking, although you wouldn't be able to tell since he always had his hood up. He never took his sunglasses off, even inside. Teachers eventually stopped asking him to because he would never listen anyway. Now comes the weird stuff. He didn't have any friends, but had this weird tendency to adopt people. What I mean by that is if he liked you, which he could decide randomly one day, he would walk up to you and say, "You're adopted," meaning you were part of his circle or whatever. Apparently, this would make you safe from him or something. That's at least what he'd say about it. He didn't really like that many people, though, so few people were ever really adopted. I was one of those few. Looking back, it was probably because he had a crush on me. None of us believed his demon spiel, and everyone just assumed he was a troubled kid, which she definitely was. Oh yeah, I should probably mention that this all takes place in Wayne, Pennsylvania, which is where I grew up. Another girl I used to be friends with, Gabby, had also been adopted by him. Patrick's crush on her was a little more obvious, and all my friends knew it. One day, my friends and I were chilling on the dugouts behind our high school, killing time and doing God knows what. It was me, Gabby, Laura, and Luke. I can't exactly remember how it happened, but the topic of conversation flowed over to Patrick's crush on Gabby. We were all laughing about it, and Gabby was pretty obviously embarrassed. I can't remember what it was, but there was a nickname we'd substitute for Patrick's name because his real name was too clunky. This time, though, I distinctly remember Laura using Patrick's real name. The third time she said it, I swear in my life that Patrick appeared out of nowhere and jumped on top of the dugout with a baseball bat in his hand. It wasn't scary in a typical sense, but it was one of the most unsettling things I'd ever seen up until that point. We quickly stopped talking, nervous that he might have overheard us talking about him. He didn't say anything, though, and just stared at us. I gave him a little wave, and he nodded in acknowledgement at me before jumping back down to the ground and swiftly walking away. After we were sure he was gone, the four of us burst into laughter, finding humor in how weird the whole encounter was. On the inside, though, I was still a little disturbed. The next incident I can remember was significantly more creepy and impossible to laugh about. I was literally in Laura's house, and the two of us were hanging out in her room. Her parents were home. I'm not sure what exactly we were talking about, but again, Patrick's name was said 3 times between the two of us. Not 10 minutes later, we heard Laura's front door slam shut. Confused, we went downstairs to see if one of our other friends had decided to pull up. Laura was friends with everyone, and her parents were super chill, so people came and went unannounced when it came to her house. Laura's mom had beaten us to the door, though. We turned the corner of the living room and stared in shock at Patrick, who was just standing there, talking to Laura's mom. She asked him what he was doing there, to which he literally replied, "I was summoned." Laura's mom made some small talk with him before politely asking him to leave, which he silently did. The reason why more alarm bells weren't going off was because Laura's mom actually knew Patrick and pitied him. Laura and I weren't as calm about the situation, though. As we walked back up the stairs, we talked to each other with horrified faces about how creepy that was. A few minutes later, we made the connection between the two events. He seemed to pop up when his name was uttered 3 times. I know how ridiculous this sounds, but we had both witnessed 2 unexplainable events and knew Patrick's history of claiming to be a demon. How else could someone else rationalize what had taken place? We told all of our friends about the incident the next day, and our friend group swore to never say his name 3 times in one conversation again. Things were going well for a few months, and I started to think that maybe I had overreacted. That is, until one day when my same group of friends were hanging out at my other friend Johnny's house. We were chilling on his back deck when the topic of conversation again found itself concerning Patrick. Despite all of our efforts to convince him, Johnny refused to believe what we told him about Patrick. Even after confirming the story with the entire group, he was still skeptical. To display his disbelief, he jokingly used Patrick's name 3 times in the same sentence to our dismay. When nothing happened, he grinned and told us we were stupid to believe something so ridiculous. As annoyed as I was, part of me was relieved that he hadn't shown up. I spoke too soon, though, because a few minutes later, Patrick jumped over Johnny's backyard fence. Johnny noticed him first and stopped speaking mid-sentence. The rest of us followed suit and went dead silent, nervous about what Patrick might do this time.
We watched as he stared at us for a few seconds before jumping back over the fence and disappearing out of sight. Johnny started freaking out and accused us of conspiring with Patrick to scare him. We told him that we literally begged him not to say anything. We sat in silence for a while before Johnny eventually told us all to go home, clearly shaken from the experience.
The last experience I had concerning Patrick was definitely the scariest and most disturbing. It was the only one where I felt like my life might have actually been in danger. A few months after the incident at Johnny's house, I was home alone one night. My parents rarely left the house back then, so this was a rare occurrence. I decided to take advantage of the situation and invited a boy over whom I'd been talking to. He was kind of a tool, but so were most of the guys I was talking to at that age. We were hanging out in my room, and it was lightly raining outside. After a while, he mentioned something about Patrick, which made me visibly cringe. He got confused, so I explained the situation to him. He burst out laughing and told me he was going to say Patrick's name to scare me. I begged him not to, but he did it anyway. Only this time, he didn't just say it, he literally screamed Patrick's name 3 times at the top of his lungs. There was no delay this time. The moment he finished yelling, I could hear the rain instantly pick up outside. A few seconds later, there was a flash of lightning. I started to freak out. The guy I was with actually seemed sorry and told me it was probably just an extremely unlikely coincidence. I cursed him out and ran to my window to look at the storm. I glanced down to look at my driveway and screamed when I saw a silhouette of a person looking up at my window. It was too dark and stormy to know for sure, but I was 99% certain that it was Patrick. I shut the blinds and rushed downstairs to make sure all the doors were locked. After locking the back door, I saw that person again. Only this time he was standing motionlessly in my front yard. I felt a panic attack coming on, and I knew Patrick was going to find a way inside my house. I started screaming, "I'm adopted," over and over again, hoping that would do something. I know there was no way he'd have been able to hear me, but my brain was all over the place at that point. The guy I was with ran down the stairs a few seconds later and picked me up off the kitchen floor in an attempt to comfort me. I looked out the window again, and he was gone. The storm was still coming down like crazy though, but it's not like I was going to search the property anyway. The next morning after that guy had left, I went out to inspect my yard. To my horror, I found something sinister in the far corner of my backyard. It was Patrick's hoodie, and wrapped inside of it were a couple random belongings of mine that I assumed I lost. My parents were gone another day, and I was too scared to call the police. I figured I'd show my parents what I had found after school the next day, and they'd take it from there. I never had to, though. The next day, Patrick didn't show up to school. He didn't up the day after that either. None of us ever saw him again, and no one knew what happened to him. My parents still live in the same house, which is something I think about a lot. I know this isn't your typical scary story, but I'm not sure where else to vent about this. A few people from school told me they caught Patrick hiding and eavesdropping on their conversations, which could explain how he was able to show up out of nowhere. As I've grown older and thought back on the whole thing, I think what makes the most sense is Patrick was just a mentally ill stalker who followed me and possibly other girls around, hence why he was always able to appear when his name was brought up. It scares me out just imagining him following me around all over the place, listening to me. I don't even want to wonder where he is.
Today I'm from Denver. This happened a few years ago. My friend Mike and I were heading to a dinner party one snowy Saturday evening. We decided to stop at a liquor store before heading to the party. It was honestly a pretty annoying detour with the snow coming down, but we didn't want to show up completely empty-handed. We picked out some local craft beers and a bottle of whiskey and made our way back to the car. I remember the snow started to pick up around then, but it was nothing we weren't used to. He ran back into the liquor store to grab a pack of Zins, his latest nicotine fixation. I remember being annoyed about that because I was the one driving and didn't have the best car, the snow at the time. After a few minutes, he emerged from the liquor store and hopped in the car. I immediately pulled out of the parking lot and we were back on our way. The snow was falling even heavier now, covering the roads in a thick blanket of white. The drive to the party was supposed to be straightforward, about 20 to 30 minutes through familiar suburban neighborhoods. Things in my life are never as easy as they seem, though. The snowstorm had other plans, turning what was supposed to be a relaxing route into a treacherous journey. Let me just say, I'm not a great driver as is, and the car slipping every 10 seconds didn't help matters. After a tense few minutes driving uphill, I turned a corner and was met with a sight no one ever wants to see. In the middle of the street was a stopped car. Its hazards were flashing ominously, cutting through the falling snow like distress signals. Both the driver's and passenger side doors were open. I was tempted to just drive around it and continue on my merry way, but Mike instructed me to stop. Judge me if you want, but I'm not your typical Good Samaritan. I've been through way too much BS in my life that has ultimately resulted in a distrust in strangers I typically default to. I told him we were late, but he urged me to stop with a concerned voice. Mike had gotten me into trouble before with his childlike curiosity, but this was different. Someone could be in trouble. Reluctantly, I stopped the car, and the two of us sat in a motionless silence for a few seconds. Mike asked if we should check it out, which I told him was what we were doing. He rolled his eyes and told me watching the car from through the windshield wasn't going to accomplish anything. He was kind of right. I really didn't want to get out of the car, though, nervous about the situation. I asked him if he'd just wait a few more minutes, which he reluctantly agreed to. We sat there, watching the eerie blinking of the hazards against what was otherwise a beautiful snowy backdrop. Nothing happened, which I was kind of surprised by. Eventually, Mike said he had had enough and was going to investigate. Before I could stop him, he stepped out of the car. I watched with a rising sense of apprehension as he approached the vehicle. As he was doing so, I could have sworn I saw something dark move out of the corner of my eye. It might have been my worried mind playing tricks on me, but this situation was seeming worse and worse to me every second that passed. Not even 10 seconds later, I thought I saw the car jolt a little, like something had moved in the trunk or back seat. Again, maybe my mind was playing tricks on me, but I didn't care. I made a quick time decision and slammed on the horn, startling Mike, who had been inspecting the inside of the vehicle. He understood what I was communicating and sprinted back to the car. I drove off immediately and told him my suspicion that the whole thing was a trap. He was pretty annoyed when I told him I didn't have any actual proof, but I responded in a firm voice that I wasn't going to risk my life for someone who could easily call for help. The rest of the drive was pretty tense, to be completely honest. He was the type of guy to hold a grudge longer than most. We arrived at the dinner party, and things were finally normal again. We were there for several hours, and Mike and I had all but forgotten what happened earlier. After a nice dinner and an enjoyable time catching up with old friends, our host turned on the TV to give some departing guests an update on the snowstorm. He flicked over to the local news, and what I saw was actually horrifying. The police were issuing reports of a stolen vehicle that had been jacked not even 2 hours earlier. They were circulating a spoken account from the victim, which went something like this. A woman was driving her teenage son home from a friend's house when she noticed a car in the middle of the road, hazards on and doors open. The two approached the car to see if someone was in distress, and as they did, two men sprung out from behind a snowbank and another emerged from the trunk of the vehicle. They held the woman at gunpoint and forced her to turn over her keys. They promptly sped off with the stolen car along with the one that had been used in the trap. I stared at Mike with a look of pure fear that could have been us. The two of us told the rest of the party what happened earlier, and that quickly put a damper on the general atmosphere, but people were eating the story up. The worst thing about this experience is that I'm even more distrusting of strangers than I previously was. I often think about how many people I would have otherwise helped out in a time of need had I not experienced such a meticulous trap.